Hello everyone, welcome to Stratford Literary Festival. My name is Nikki Cox. We were very disappointed that we had to cancel this spring's festival because of the COVID-19 outbreak, but we thought we'd bring you a taster of some of the events that you will have missed. So welcome to Stratford Goes Virtual. I'm delighted to introduce playwright, novelist, translator, and many other things, Michael Frayn. Michael began his career as a journalist on The Guardian and The Observer. His novels include Towards the End of the Morning, Headlong, Spies, and most recently Skios. And his 17 plays, yes, 17, range from The Farce of Noises Off, recently chosen of one of Britain's favourite 3 plays, to Copenhagen, often cited as the best play about science ever written. Michael's here to talk with us about his new book of short comic pieces, Magic Mobile, 35 preloaded new text files. Hello, Michael. Nice to see you.
Hello, nice to be here.
Could you tell us a little bit about where the inspiration for these text files have come from? Because they seem very apt at this moment in time.
Well, I don't know. I seem to have gone back to writing short pieces. I began my career as a reporter and then started writing a funny column in The Guardian and The Observer. So for years, I wrote short, funny pieces. And I think in my old age, I'm now 86, I've kind of second childhood. Don't have ideas for novels and plays, and I've gone back to the short pieces again.
Is it a form that you have continued to work with alongside the other work? Because it seems to me like you are a writer that spins many plates at the same time.
Yes, I have had odd bursts of writing funny bits over the years, short pieces. It's very attractive. I mean, it's quite a big deal setting up a novel or a play. It's going to take a lot of time and involve far more work and far more ideas than you think when you begin. But short pieces are very attractive because you can set them up and write them quite quickly.
Yeah, and are you a writer that has a notebook with them a lot of the time, or are you a writer that goes, this is my time to write, especially with these sort of short pieces?
I have a mobile phone with me which has a facility on it for recording things. So if I do get ideas, my memory is now completely gone. If I do get ideas, I make a little note on the phone. No.
So you embrace the technology that you're poking a little stick at in these sketches.
Absolutely, it's completely unreasonable. I should be mocking mobile phones. I absolutely love them. Love computers, love working on a word processor, and particularly love the mobile phone. I mean, it's just amazing. This tiny little thing you put in your pocket, and it gives you the world.
And it must be very interesting. I mean, I'm reading this book in lockdown, as we now are, where we're so reliant on technology. It's been a very interesting moment to be publishing it at this moment in time.
Well, it's not the best moment for publishing a book, of course, when all the bookshops are closed. But it's true. There's a lot about mobile technology and things in there, and that's absolutely what comes into its own at the moment. I'm having wonderful zoom-ins with the family at the moment. It was my eldest daughter Rebecca's birthday yesterday, and we had a huge family zoom-in, which I very much enjoyed.
It seems to be an interesting mash at the moment of using technology like Zoom to try and play board games, and the more analog. We seem to be embracing two moments, which I think there are moments in some of your sketches seem to be so precise at this moment.
Yes, well, I haven't tried board games, but I suppose you could play chess, couldn't you?
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Oh, well, you gave me an idea, right?
Oh, well, there you go. I'm sparing ideas. The thing is, I have ordered it and it hasn't arrived because you wrote a novel in 1968, A Very Private Life, which I understand sort of predates what the world we're living in at this precise moment. Is it strange to be living your futuristic writing?
Which is very curious because there has been a certain amount of comment that people have been talking about this novel as if it predicted the future. It was really, I suppose it was about the way things were going, that people had less and less physical contact with each other and more contact by electronics. There's no real difference, actually, between seeing you on the screen and seeing you in the flesh, because if I were with you in the room, what would be happening? Photons from the sun would be being absorbed by you and then re-emitted and coming to my eye, and the only contact between us would be the photons that are coming off you. The photons coming off my screen are not particularly different, are they? It's just one little extra link in the electronics that connect us anyway.
Yes, yes. And in terms of the sketches in the book, it's an interesting thought about the theatre that is contained within this book, and what we think of as theatre, just being between two people can be theatre, can't it? An empty space. Peter Brook wrote about somebody walking across an empty space and somebody watching is an act of theatre.
Yes, and the part played by the person watching is extremely important. I mean, it's absolutely very much a part of the theatre that there is an audience of people watching it. Might be a small audience. Hopefully, it's a large audience, a lot of people packed together in the same room, who kind of infect each other with their responses. But actors acting on the stage and no one looking at them, it's not theatre. It's very important that people see what's going on and respond to it and try to make sense of it. And actors are very sensitive to the response of an audience, and quite unconsciously, if they're getting a good response, their performance slightly rises, and the response of the audience rises as a result, and you get what's called positive feedback.
Yes.
You get negative feedback where an audience are not responding very well, and the performance of the actors goes down slightly. I can remember seeing a preview of one of my plays, which had been going perfectly well. Previews. Then one night, something went astray in this connection between the audience and the actors. I remember who it was, and the whole show kind of disappeared in front of your eyes. Terrible.
It's interesting, isn't it? Especially with a comedy, that somebody with a loud laugh you appreciate, because there is that ripple effect that brings in the whole audience if the laugh isn't too annoying. But that feeling of community.
It's particularly important for comedy and even more for farce. And scientists have actually discovered that the strongest trigger for laughter is the sound of somebody else laughing. It's not someone's trousers falling off or whatever. It is the sound of somebody else laughing. And I'm always quoting in these talks the Tanganyika laughter epidemic. And people think I made this up, but actually you can check it out. Look up Tanganyika laughter epidemic on your phone, and you'll discover that sometime when before Tanzania became independent, it was still called Tanganyika, two girls in a girls' school somewhere started laughing together. Well, many girls in many girls' schools sort of had a laugh together, but for some reason this set off some of the other girls in the same class, and eventually everyone in the class was laughing, and that somehow infected the rest of the school, and eventually all the girls in the school were laughing, and they couldn't do lessons, and the authorities had to close the school down. But by this time, they had set off girls in other schools. And eventually, the authorities had to close, I can't remember, something like 30 schools across Tanganyika and keep them closed for 18 months. It was very much like the coronavirus. So hearing other people laughing is an absolutely important part of watching comedy.
Yeah, and that idea of life being stranger, or funnier, or farce-like in itself, that we don't have to push that far. Is you are such a master of farce. We can't talk to you without talking about Noises Off, but it floods through this book as well in terms of, I mean, there is what I think my favourite sketch in this book is the politician whose spouse is trying to get them to go and buy tea bags, which one feels just seems to resonate this moment, and we're seeing politicians just answering with this empty rhetoric.
Well, the sad thing about that sketch is it's really Theresa May. Unfortunately, got removed from office long before the book was published.
Yes.
That's one of the difficulties about writing anything that might be remotely described as satire, is the situation keeps changing all the time, much faster than you can keep up with.
But it is that thing of watching. I think I was reading it and then tuned into the daily briefing and was just like, oh yes, it's we're living this moment right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
What attracts you to the absurd? Where do you think that has come from?
Well, I don't know. They're just, I mean, there are a lot of terrible things in the world, really awful things, very serious things. But there are also funny things. And it's difficult not to notice them and be interested in them. One of the things I think which probably set me off on the downward path in life was my father.
Okay.
My father was a salesman. But he suffered from deafness. There was congenital deafness in the family. And somewhere in early middle age, he went deaf, very deaf indeed. And I'm now deaf with old age, but not remotely as deaf as he was. So this affected his life. He had to wrap himself up in yards and yards of wire connected with microphone here, and a transmitter there, and spare batteries in his back pocket. I mean, a hearing aid in those days was an enormously complicated thing, not like the few little tiny things I'm wearing in my ears now. But he had to go out and face people every day, and what he sewed was roofing. So he had to answer technical questions. I mean, architects and builders wanted to know what the fire resistance of his products was and that kind of thing. And one of the ways he coped with having to face people was humor. He told a lot of jokes, because if you tell a joke, you don't have to listen to the response. People either laugh or they don't laugh, and you go on to the next joke. And I rather think I picked something of that up from him.
There is something within farce and within the magic mobile scenes in terms of having control, and especially, I mean, you have in this book you have sat navs talking back to inept humans, and there is something about the human need to have control over everything, and when that disappears, the joy in that.
I suppose that's one of the essences of farce, isn't it? It's losing control of the situation, having a wonderful plan for your adulterous meeting somewhere, and something going slightly astray in it. Usually in traditional farce, what then happens is someone tells a lie to cover up the first problem. And of course, far from making the situation better, it makes it worse, because then you've got to cover up that lie by inventing something even more outrageous to cover the situation. I mean, it's happening to politicians all the time. It's usually what constitutional scandal, what brings a politician down, is not so much doing something wrong, politicians doing wrong all the time, it's trying to conceal it.
Yes.
They get caught out in the concealment.
There's again, I think that because we are in this moment of change, and again, it's life has caught up with your book. There's again a great letter within this book, which is the gas supplier thanking somebody for their payment, and there's been a definite change of tone in terms of advertising at this moment in time. Have you found that interesting to see?
Yes, I suppose there is. I mean, one of the unfairnesses of this book is, for instance, there's a bit about the response system you get if you ring a firm you have a contract with to maintain your central heating. And it's endless announcements at the beginning about how the firm is regulated by the financial and authority, and how the call is being recorded for training purposes, while you're just sitting there waiting to explain about the problems of your central heating. Well, that pretty much was the situation when I wrote the piece. But in fact, our gas maintenance company, our central heating maintenance company, has now improved its website considerably. Yeah. And you get through very quickly to a human being to whom you can explain the situation. So I feel a bit mean that I haven't been able to catch up with this.
But I think that's the joy of this, is that you have been predicting the future in many ways. In terms of there's one of the early scenes is online writing courses, and it's always interesting as an interviewer to interview a writer, because I know you've been asked these questions a number of times. But the idea that at this moment in time that we should all be self-improving, and your ideas of online courses, and in fact you were in this week's Guardian, weren't you, about how to be creative in lockdown? So.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Well, I'm very unfair about those courses, because in fact a lot of good writers have done them. They've done the course and have actually learned something about writing. But I can't understand, I can't see how you actually learn something from a course. And when people ask me, as people always do ask writers, how do I learn to write or whatever, how do I write a novel, how do I write a play? I would say it's very simple. You can have my course for nothing. It's in 3 words: just do it. Because in the end, whether you've done the course or not, that's what you have to do. You have to just do it.
It is a lovely thing about how to start day one. The one course being how to start writing, and then day 2 being how to continue writing, which is lovely.
Well, my own employers, The Guardian, of whom I'm extremely fond, have run these writing courses. They have actually managed to break the subject down into an enormous range of sub-departments, like if you've written chapter 1, how to go on to write chapter 2. You have to pay another fee to get to the next chapter.
That's where they get you, isn't it? You are a brilliant translator of Chekhov, and I wanted to ask you what, we've just talked about, just do it, but in terms of translating Chekhov, did that have an effect on how you wrote your own plays?
Well, I think it probably did, yes. I only translate Chekhov, incidentally, because as far as I know, I'm the only person around who both can read Russian and has got some experience of writing plays. And lots of good translations of Chekhov have been done by people who have no knowledge of Russian at all. They work from a literal translation or from other people's standard translations, and do make a perfectly good job of it. But I think there's something to be said sometimes for somebody who can actually read the original translation. And one of the things you have to do if you translate particularly a play is you have to understand the dynamics of it. You can't just do it line by line. You have to think what makes the play work, what's the driving force of all these characters. So you have to make a pretty close study. And one of the surprising things I discovered from translating Chekhov is that his plays are all plot. Never thought of this before. I mean, they're so wonderfully written. They appear to be just people just happening to say this and they happen to say that and so forth, just as we do in daily life. But if you look at the structure of those plays, every line is driving forward the business of the play. That's why they're so good. That's why they work in so many different languages, in so many different cultures, because they're really good stories.
Yeah.
And I hope I've absorbed something of that. I think plot gets a bad reputation now. People think that plot is just something left over from doing popular fiction in the past. But plot is very important. Plot is a way of bringing out the connections between events that you don't quite see in life. Life goes by too quickly to quite grasp it. And one of the things that literature and art does is to stop it in its tracks for a moment so you can look at it. And one of the things that fiction can bring out is this connection between events that you often can't see in life. And I think there's a lot to be said for plot.
Yeah. Going completely the other way now, but in the book, you've kind of rewritten Waiting for Godot in the light of technology.
Yeah, well, it's
which seems to, I know we've gone from Chekhov to Beckett, but in a very different way. But
those two tramps would have a much better time now if they got mobile phones. A lot of their problems would be solved.
Is it having had such a long career and seeing how technology has progressed through your life, how has that altered how you write? I mean, I'm thinking about Noises Off, written in the sort of mid-70s, where you the amount of information that you give your actors, directors, in terms of stage direction, and then moving forward to I'm right in saying Copenhagen has no stage direction in it, and the same with these small sketches that very few character names. I don't know whether that's to do with technology or brevity or
No, I think it's to do with the story. Noises Off, it is all a large part of his action backstage with no dialogue. So you've got to explain what the action is and how it connects with the action going on the stage. But for Copenhagen, I thought deliberately I would write it without stage directions and let directors do it as they wanted, do it highly realistically with dining tables and silverware and people eating real food or whatever on stage, or as it seems to be a much better way of doing it, absolutely simply. Yeah. And when Michael Blakemore did the original production, he did it with 3 actors and 3 chairs on an otherwise empty stage. And I think what's changed for me is not really the technology, but just seeing that theatre can be done much more simply. That really the essence of theatre is actors saying this and saying that to each other and moving like this and moving like that on the stage. And that's all you need. You don't need to describe elaborate stage settings or whatever. We can mostly imagine that from the action that's going on in front of our eyes.
It's a dreadful question to ask a writer, but do you think you've got better at being concise with your language? But I think there's a joy. You obviously have a joy of writing and of language, the precision, again, another sketch where the writer is. Did you like that? Was that okay? Was the grammar correct? Did that work for you? That you obviously have a joy in playing with language, all that sort of. Have you become more concise?
More concise, but it's the language does offer lots of wonderful possibilities for examining itself. And if when you write, you can get some fun out of the language, get some springiness out of the language, make the language itself tell the story and paint the scene, that seems to me a good thing. Whether I've got more concise, I don't know. Um, I've always liked shortness, actually. I mean, most of my novels are quite short.
Mm.
Most of my plays are fairly short. And I do like the short form, yes, I do like conciseness. Yeah.
How do you how did you make a active decision in terms of what form you're going to use when you write, or as you're writing, does the form manifest itself?
Well, it's part of the idea. When you've got an idea, the idea is how to tell the story.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems natural to do it as to be acted by actors, and sometimes it's natural to do it, to read it on the page.
Mm-hmm.
I was saying that the principal theoretical difference between a book and a play is that in a play we don't know what the characters are thinking and feeling. We only know what they tell us. Yes. Whereas in a book, it's absolutely natural for the author to say she had felt most bitter resentment about that. He decided he would travel to Stratford-on-Avon or whatever, which implies that the author has access to the heads of the characters and their thinking and feeling. Well, so in some ways, theatre is more like life, because I don't have access to your head, you don't have access to mine. We have to try and work out what you're feeling from expression on your face, from what you say, your behavior. But in other ways, a novel is more like life, because there's one person to whom we think we do have better access than that. We do have access to our own feelings and thoughts. Whether we in fact do is a considerable philosophical question, and indeed I wrote a play about it, Copenhagen. Does Heisenberg really know? The question is, why does he go to Copenhagen to have this very important conversation with Niels Bohr in the middle of the war? But the question is also, does he really know himself what he's doing? Or does he need the conversation with Bohr in order to clarify his own thinking to him?
Yeah, and that idea that we are alive in this moment, and what affects us at this present time is what we live at this present time, if that makes sense.
Yes.
When you're writing play scripts, I mean, I work as a director as well, and I'm interested in how present you were when you were in a rehearsal room, in terms of your scripts, or are your, how much influence did a director or actors have on your script? And when writing in the short form, how do you become those actors?
Right. Well, the way I've worked mostly with my plays, most of my plays, first production has been done by Michael Blakemore. And Michael and I are very old friends. We know each other's long comings and shortcomings very well. And I absolutely trust him. And we do a lot of work together on the text. And he makes me read it aloud to him, which is a very embarrassing experience. I have absolutely no acting ability at all. I can't even hit the right stress in my own lines. But it means everything looked at, and he stops me and asks stupid questions. Right. Stupid questions are always the best questions, because they go to the heart of problems, and they demonstrate that the person doesn't think he knows the answer already. So we have these long sessions where we work on the text, and often Michael makes suggestions. With Noises Off, he made a very radical suggestion without which the play would never have worked. In the end, we end up with a text which we both think works. And then we go into the rehearsal room. I go into the first day and I say hello to the cast, and wonderful that you're here, and so forth. And then I go away and leave them get on with it. Right. And then when Michael says there's something to see, as a run of an act or whatever, I go back in and have a look. And it's quite useful if someone stays out of the rehearsal room, because things change very slowly from day to day in the rehearsal room. And it's quite useful if someone, sympathetic observer, comes in at some late stage and can see what's happened. And sometimes it's wonderful things, sometimes it's things that you feel should be done differently. So that's the way I mostly work with him. But of course, when further productions are done of the play in different countries, I can't conceivably get to have conversations with the directors. And some of the results are quite strange, particularly in Germany. I love Germany, and I'm absolutely the Germanophile. But the one thing I'm uneasy about in Germany is German theatre production, because it's dominated by the director. And German directors, by and large, do feel it's their duty to make their mark on a text by messing it around, preferably changing it out of all recognition and working against the intentions of the writer. Not always the case. There are perfectly good theatre directors in Germany who do wonderful productions. But it is a tradition in Germany. I think it's because German theatre depends so much on doing revivals of classics.
Yes.
And if you do a revival of classics, the director, you want to you want to demonstrate that you've done something with the text.
Yeah. But
with new plays, that's not the question. I think the real test of a director is doing a new play. It's partly because no one has seen it before, and so you've got to start from the very beginning. It's also because you don't know whether it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
If you do a production of Hamlet, or for that matter of Absurd Person Singular, you know it's been done before, you know it works. And you've just got to make it work again, which is hard enough. If you do a new play, you've got this terrible undermining uncertainty all the time. Is it going to work, or is it going to be a flop? And it's so awful having a flop that I think it's like a climber climbing, because you mustn't look down. If you look down and see all those thousands of feet of empty air underneath you, you lose your nerve immediately.
Yeah.
So I think that's the real test of a director. And that's where Michael Blakemore is so great. He's absolutely wonderful at doing new plays. He's used to working with a writer and trying to get things right.
Yeah.
And then somehow having the confidence to walk across the tightrope or climb up the north face of the Eiger.
So somebody external, sort of, you're both challenging each other.
Yes, yes.
So when you write novels, or these short scripts, who becomes that challenger?
You don't have one. I mean, you hope with a good editor does make suggestions and so forth, and I have had very good editors at Faber, but you don't have that test. You don't have the test of the live audience. A book may be a total flop, but you don't have to watch people reading it and failing to laugh when they should be laughing and so forth. Yeah. They sit at home and let them get on with making your life a misery. But with a play, there they are. People are either laughing or they're not laughing. And if it's supposed to be funny and they're not laughing, it's very, very painful.
Our original event, we were going to be joined by a couple of actors performing this, so that would have been an interesting thing. The good news is, I'm going to tell people watching that the Radio 4 have done an adaptation of this, which starts next Wednesday, the 13th of May. I'm just looking at my notes, at 11:30. So if you want to hear these with some brilliant actors, David Suchet and Martin Jarvis. Were you involved in that, or do you pass this on and
this time? Martin Jarvis has done many radio versions of my books and plays. He's read the books and he's done performed versions of these short pieces in earlier books. He's extremely skilled at radio in every way, both performing and directing. And he's also very good at getting an amazing cast of actors. I don't know how it's easier to get very good actors to do a radio thing because it only involves a day or two's work. Yeah. But he does get absolutely astonishing cast. And this time, I thought he'd done it so well in the past that I would actually like to work with him. So we did what I do with Michael Blakemore. We read through all the sketches together, and I made a lot of alterations for radio, reduced because things should be much shorter for performance, and made some of them more accessible to radio. And then I went into as many of the recording sessions as I could, partly because it's just so enjoyable listening to actors do them. But he commutes, or he does when there's no coronavirus around, between London and Los Angeles. So he recorded about half the pieces in London and about half in Los Angeles. And I didn't get to Los Angeles for those recordings, but I did go into all the London sessions and had an absolutely lovely time, and occasionally did make a little suggestion to him.
Excellent, excellent. Last couple of questions, just because we have gone over our half an hour, but it's so enjoyable listening to you speak. There is a sketch in here about the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand and how that is skipped over in many forms, from novels to films, and a character coming out and going, hang on, this is a life-changing, altering event. In terms of the moment we're in now, what sort of what sort of work do you think is going to come out of this life-changing moment, and will it be skipped over in the same way?
Well, the point is not really it was skipped over. It was that the death of the Archduke Ferdinand is used over and over again in drama as a dramatic irony. People are apparently having a happy time, they've got this happy life to look forward to. And when we hear Archduke assassinated, we know this means the First World War is starting and everything is going to be disrupted. What the event is going to be that people use to signal that the coronavirus event is just about to happen, I don't know. Probably one of those announcements about how it's not going to happen, which were many, particularly from President Trump. And as soon as somebody like President Trump says there's not going to be a coronavirus disaster in America, you know there is. But so that may be one of those things that people will latch on as a little dramatic irony that tells us that everything is going haywire. Yeah.
And in terms of how you think, I guess because it's what I'm interested in, and I think it's the conversation we're all having in our world, it's how this will alter theatre. We've talked about it being a sense of community coming together, and how comedy especially reacts to that. But how can you see how theatre needs to change, or how it might deal with this situation right now?
But it's very difficult to see. I mean, please God, we're going to get back to theatre as we know it, with a live audience sitting very close to each other, less than 2 meters apart. I mean, as I said in some article I did recently, or some interview I did, if we have to do theatre with 2 meters between the left and right of each member of the audience, and 2 meters gap in front and 2 meters behind, it's going to be it's going to be financially not viable, but it's also not going to be theatre because you need people packed together. Yeah. And if we can't get back to that, I mean, if the crisis goes on and on and on, as some crises do, I think we're going to be doing cinema on television and not live theatre. I can't see how live theatre, you can do live theatre without a live audience, and find live audiences sitting quite close to each other.
Yeah, because it relies on that on-stage, off-stage relationship, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and the relationship of each member of the audience to everybody else. Yeah. Being set off, being infected, not just with laughter, I mean, you're infected with other people's, for instance, their attention. If other people around you are held or gripped by what they're seeing on the stage, you tend to be gripped yourself. If they're not, if they're scratching their heads and blowing their noses and looking on the floor for where they drop their chocolates, your own attention tends to wander as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you for joining us, Michael, in these slightly odd circumstances. I will hold your book up again to say Magic Mobile, out now, a joy to read and very connected to this moment in time. And as I said, if you want to listen to it, it's on Radio 4, May the 13th, 11 30. Great to hear that Michael's been involved in that. Thank you for watching. There is a link on the Festival Goes virtual page for ordering Michael's book. Please order. And other interviews will also be available on the page. We hope to see you all at our winter festival in November, and stay safe.